Hey everyone! Welcome back to the English Medium Podcast, the show where your English improves quietly while your everyday decisions become a little clearer, a little calmer, and a lot more practical for real life.
I like that, Lily, because today we are not talking about fantasy money or overnight success. We are talking about the kind of money relationship people actually live with every day, the one that shows up when the bank app opens and the feelings start moving.
Exactly. Most people do not panic because they are irresponsible. They panic because they are unsure. They know money is important, but they cannot always explain where it goes, why it disappears so quickly, or why the month feels longer than the paycheck.
And that confusion is so common. You can be educated, hardworking, even careful, and still feel like your finances are one small mystery after another. That is why financial literacy matters, because it turns mystery into something you can actually work with.
So let us start with the obvious question. When you open your banking app, what do you feel first? Relief, curiosity, guilt, surprise, or that tiny pause where you think, wait, how did we get here again? That moment tells you a lot about your habits.
Yeah, and sometimes that pause is followed by a very creative form of denial. You scroll, you blink, you act like the number might change if you stare at it long enough. It is funny, but it is also honest because money can make even smart people hesitate.
The good news is that hesitation is not failure. It is information. If your money situation makes you uncomfortable, that does not mean you are bad with money forever. It just means you have data to work with, and data is where better decisions begin.
That is a healthier way to look at it. Instead of saying, I am terrible with money, you can say, something here is not matching my life, my values, or my goals. Once you frame it that way, you stop attacking yourself and start observing the pattern.
And that pattern is exactly what financial literacy helps you see. Not big theory, not complicated formulas, just the simple truth of whether your money is doing what you think it is doing in daily life, week after week, month after month.
I remember a time when I looked responsible on paper. Good income, stable job, no dramatic chaos. But inside, I still had no clear idea where the money was going. I could not answer the most basic question without a long, uncomfortable silence.
That is such an important point. A lot of people assume money problems only happen when life is falling apart, but often the problem is quieter than that. It is a slow leak, a habit loop, a set of small decisions that never get checked or corrected.
Exactly. It is not always one huge mistake. Sometimes it is 10 tiny choices that seem harmless on their own. Coffee here, delivery there, a subscription you forgot, a little impulse buy, and suddenly the month is over and the balance is confusing.
So let us move into the first habit, because this is where things become practical. The first step is to align your money with your values. In other words, before you ask where the money went, ask what matters enough to deserve that money.
That question is powerful because it cuts through excuses. People say they value health, family, peace, learning, or freedom, but then their spending tells a different story. Money does not lie, and that can be uncomfortable, but it is also very useful.
If you say health matters to you, your spending should support that in some visible way. If you say learning matters, your money should point toward books, courses, or tools that help you grow. Values are not just ideas, they are financial footprints.
And if those footprints do not match your words, that is okay. It does not mean you are fake. It means your habits have drifted away from your intentions, which happens to almost everyone. The point is to notice the drift before it becomes your default.
I think that is why people feel stuck. They want a dramatic change, but what actually changes lives is alignment, not perfection, not a sudden personality transplant, just a few repeated choices that slowly begin to point in the same direction.
Right, because alignment is more sustainable than guilt. Guilt gives you a burst of motivation, then exhaustion. Alignment gives you a reason, and reasons last longer. When you know why a choice matters, you are less likely to abandon it the next week.
Let us make it concrete. If peace of mind matters to you, then maybe you build an emergency cushion. If flexibility matters, maybe you keep some money available instead of spending everything immediately. Values become easier when they turn into decisions.
And that brings us to habit number 2, the monthly reset. I love this one because it is simple and realistic. Once a month, you sit down for 20 or 30 minutes and review what happened, not to punish yourself, but to become aware again.
Yes, a money date. That sounds serious, but it can actually be calm. You do not need candles and music unless that helps. You just need a quiet moment, a clear view of your spending, and the willingness to ask honest questions without drama.
The questions are straightforward. Where did my money actually go? Did my spending match my priorities? What is one thing I want to improve next month? That last question is important because one small improvement is easier to repeat than 10 big promises.
And that is a pattern we should keep repeating. Smaller is better than perfect. If you try to overhaul your entire life in one weekend, you probably burn out. But if you choose one specific change and actually keep it, you build trust in yourself.
That self-trust matters a lot. Money is not just numbers, it is also confidence. When you repeatedly review, adjust, and improve, you start believing that you can handle your finances instead of waiting for someone else to rescue you.
So, the monthly reset is not about judgment. It is about noticing reality before reality becomes a surprise. The more often you do it, the less emotional each review feels, because the numbers stop appearing as strangers and start appearing as signals.
And once you have signals, you can use systems. That is habit number 3, automate your life. People are not lazy in a moral sense. They are busy, distracted, and very good at avoiding boring tasks. Automation helps us work with that reality.
Absolutely. If paying bills requires willpower every single time, one tired evening is enough to create a mess. But if the bill pays automatically, the task disappears from your mental to-do list, and your energy goes toward better decisions.
Same with savings. If you wait until the end of the month to save what is left, there is usually not much left. But if a fixed amount moves automatically the moment income arrives, you stop negotiating with yourself every single payday.
That is why systems are better than mood. Mood changes, motivation changes, energy changes, but a decent system keeps working even when you are tired, distracted, or frustrated. It does the job quietly, so you do not have to restart every week.
And this is where people often say, but I should have more discipline. Maybe, but discipline is not the only path. A good system is discipline that has been made easier, cleaner, and less dependent on a perfect version of yourself.
That is such a kind way to think about it. Not, why am I failing to be amazing every day? But what structure would help me succeed on an ordinary day? That question changes the whole conversation because it respects how humans actually live.
Speaking of ordinary days, let us talk about extra money, because that is where many people get surprised. A bonus, a refund, a side hustle payment, a gift,
any small increase can trigger a very loud voice that says, now we can treat ourselves.
Yes, and sometimes that voice is harmless, but sometimes it is very expensive. Suddenly, the extra money does not improve your life. It just passes through your hands and leaves you with a nice memory and the exact same stress you had before.
So the shift is to pause and ask different questions. Not what can I buy, but what can I keep? Not how fast can I spend this, but what can I grow? That one pause can completely change the destination of money that used to disappear immediately.
I like that because it turns money from a reward into a tool. If the money is just a reward, it gets burned quickly. If the money is a tool, it gets assigned a purpose. Purpose gives even small amounts more power than a random shopping impulse ever could.
And we should admit something here. Spending is emotionally comforting. It feels good immediately. That is why intentional money choices matter, because they ask you to choose a deeper kind of satisfaction over a faster one, which is not always easy.
No, it is not easy, but easier is not the same as better. The easier path often solves one feeling and creates three more later. The better path may feel slower now, but it tends to create peace later, and peace is worth a lot more than impulse.
That brings us to habit number 5, but I want to pause on habit 4 for 1 second. Reframing extra money is really about identity. Are you someone who reacts immediately or someone who can hold a decision long enough to make it useful?
That question gets to the heart of the matter. A lot of financial growth is not about how much you earn at first. It is about what you do when money comes in, when money leaves, and when you have the chance to make one thoughtful choice instead of 3 rushed ones.
Now, habit 5, learn less, do more. I know that sounds strange, but let me explain. A lot of people consume endless money content. Videos, podcasts, posts, threads, summaries. They feel informed, but their actual behavior does not change much.
That is the trap. Learning feels productive, especially because it is comfortable. You can sit there, nod, agree, and feel like you are becoming better without having to face the awkward part, which is making one real change in your real life.
Exactly. Action is less glamorous than knowledge, but it is where progress lives. I started asking myself a simple rule. Whenever I learn something useful, I have to do one action the same day. Not someday, not when I feel ready, the same day.
That is a strong rule because it closes the gap between insight and behavior. If you learn how to track expenses, track one expense right away. If you learn about saving, move a small amount immediately. Let the lesson leave a footprint.
And the footprint does not have to be huge. The point is to create motion. A tiny action teaches your brain that money education is not just entertainment. It is a tool for changing what happens next.
I also think action removes self-deception. When people say they are learning about money but never applying anything, they may be avoiding the pressure of change. Small action cuts through that because it asks, okay, what will you actually do now?
That question can feel rude in the best possible way. It brings you back to the present. Money does not improve because you admired a clever tip. Money improves because you used the tip, adjusted your behavior, and repeated the useful part.
So, if someone listening feels overwhelmed, the answer is not to consume more and more. The answer is to choose one tiny rule, one tiny transfer, one tiny spreadsheet, one tiny habit. Tiny can be powerful when it is repeated with attention.
That leads us to habit number 6.
talk about money. This one makes a lot of people uncomfortable because money feels private, personal, and sometimes even embarrassing. But silence often makes confusion feel normal, and confusion is expensive.
True. People often assume everyone else understands money better than they do, so they keep quiet. But the reality is that a lot of people are just improvising. They are not experts. They are learning in motion, just like everybody else.
So start with one honest conversation. Ask a friend, a sibling, or a coworker how they handle budgeting, savings, or debt. Do not make it a performance. Make it a human conversation where both people can trade tips without pretending to have everything figured out.
That kind of conversation can remove shame very quickly. Once you hear someone say, "Oh, I also struggle with that," your shoulders relax. You realize you are not uniquely broken. You are simply practicing a skill that many adults never learned deeply.
And when shame drops, curiosity rises. Curiosity is much better for financial growth. It sounds like, what works for you? What was the first thing you changed? How did you start? Those questions open the door without making the other person defensive.
There is also a language benefit here for our listeners. Talking about money in English gives you practical vocabulary for real life. You learn words that are useful outside the classroom, and that makes the learning feel immediate and alive.
Yes, because the words become part of your actual decisions. You are not just memorizing vocabulary for a test. You are using phrases like savings, expense, budget, priority, and transfer in a conversation that may genuinely improve your life.
And now we move to habit number 7, now versus later. This is the emotional battle inside so many financial choices. One part of you wants comfort now, and another part wants safety later. Both are human, and both deserve attention.
Most people think they must choose between enjoying today and protecting tomorrow. But the real skill is balance. If you only focus on now, tomorrow becomes stressful. If you only focus on later, today becomes miserable. Both extremes are costly.
So the key is not to erase enjoyment. It is to make enjoyment intentional. Ask yourself, does this purchase fit the life I am trying to build? Or is it just a reaction to stress, boredom, or social pressure? That question changes the tone.
And I like the phrase redirection more than restriction. Restriction sounds like punishment. Redirection sounds like wisdom. It says, yes, you can enjoy life, but you can also decide where your money is going on purpose instead of by accident.
That is such an important difference. When saving feels like punishment, people rebel. When saving feels like a choice, people cooperate. The emotion around the habit matters just as much as the habit itself, because emotions drive repetition.
Right, and repetition is everything. One wise decision is nice. 100 wise decisions become identity. Over time, you stop saying, I am trying to save, and start saying, I'm someone who protects my future while still living my life.
Beautifully said. Habit number 8 is related to that identity shift. Invest in yourself. Spend money on skills, not just stuff. Stuff can be enjoyable, sure, but skills keep compounding. They stay useful long after the excitement of a purchase fades.
Exactly. A gadget may break, clothes go out of style, and impulse buys lose their shine. But a useful skill can change the way you earn, communicate, solve problems, or create opportunities. That kind of spending keeps working after the receipt is gone.
So before you buy something, ask, will this matter in 3 years? That question does not mean every purchase must be serious and boring. It just helps you separate a passing mood from a decision that may actually support your future self.
And if the answer is yes, then maybe it is a great investment. If the answer is no, then maybe you are not buying a thing so much as buying a feeling, and feelings fade faster than we like to admit.
That is why self-investment is so powerful. It changes the frame from consumption to capability. What if this money helped me grow? What if it taught me something? What if it made tomorrow easier instead of just making tonight more exciting?
I also think investing in yourself builds confidence. When you pay for a course, a workshop, a book, or a tool that genuinely helps, you're making a statement that your development matters. That can be surprisingly motivating.
And it connects directly to peace of mind. If your money choices are helping you become more capable, then money begins to feel less like a threat and more like a resource. That shift alone can make daily life feel lighter.
So let us zoom out for a moment and connect everything. We started with awareness, then values, then a monthly reset, then automation, then reframing extra money, then action, then conversation, then balance, then self-investment.
And the pattern is simple, even if the details take practice. You do not need to transform overnight. You need to keep moving in a more intentional direction with a little honesty, a little structure, and a lot less shame.
That is the real message here. Financial literacy is not about sounding impressive. It is about understanding your life well enough to guide your money instead of being surprised by it every month.
And because this is the English Medium podcast, there is another layer too. As you think about money, you are also practicing English in context. You are learning vocabulary through real meaning, not isolated words on a list.
That is a huge advantage. When language and life connect, the lesson sticks. You remember the phrase because it mattered. You remember the word because it helped you understand a real decision, a real feeling, or a real habit.
So here is a simple reflection for our listeners. When you open your banking app, what do you feel? Calm? Shock? Guilt? Pressure? Curiosity? Or maybe all of them at once? Whatever it is, name it honestly, because naming is the first step toward clarity.
And then ask one more question. What is one money habit I want to change this month? Not 10 habits, not your whole personality, just one small thing that would make your life a little more stable, a little more intentional, and a little less chaotic.
That question is manageable, and manageable is powerful. When a goal feels possible, you are more likely to begin. And once you begin, you can build a rhythm. Rhythm is what turns a good idea into a habit that actually lasts.
I think people underestimate how much calm comes from repetition. A budget you check regularly, a transfer that happens automatically, a conversation you are not afraid to have, a decision you repeat because it matches your values. That is stability.
Stability also creates space for better language. You can explain your choices more clearly, ask better questions, and understand advice without feeling lost. Practical money talk is not just useful, it is empowering in the deepest sense.
And when people feel empowered, they stop seeing money as an enemy they have to fight every day. They start seeing it as a tool that can be guided, measured, and used with intention. That changes the whole emotional atmosphere around finances.
That is why this topic matters beyond numbers. It is about confidence, peace of mind, and the ability to make choices that support your life instead of quietly pulling it off track. Money is part of the story, but not the whole story.
Exactly. It is also about identity, habits, and the freedom to say, I understand my next step. That sentence can be more valuable than any clever financial slogan because it puts you back in the driver's seat.
Before we wrap up, I want to say one thing clearly. You are not behind. A lot of people feel that way, especially when they compare themselves to others. But learning starts wherever you are, and progress counts, even when it is quiet.
Yeah, quiet progress is still progress. Sometimes the biggest changes are invisible for a while. You save a little, spend a little more thoughtfully, ask one honest question, and slowly your life starts to feel less confusing and more under your care.
So take it slow. Review your spending, automate what you can, talk to someone, buy a skill when it truly matters. Keep asking what aligns with your values. The point is not perfection. The point is direction.
And if you need a starting sentence, try this. When I open my banking app, I feel. Then finish it honestly. You do not need a perfect answer. You just need a truthful one, because truth is where better habits begin.
That is a strong place to end, Mike. And I hope everyone listening feels a little less alone, a little more informed, and a little more ready to make one small decision that supports their future instead of confusing it.
Me too. Thanks for spending this time with us, and thanks for letting us talk about something practical in a way that is honest, human, and hopefully useful in daily life.
I'm Lily,
And I'm Mike.
and this is the English Medium Podcast.
See you in the next episode.
Until then, be kind to yourself, stay curious, and remember that small habits can quietly change a whole future.
And if today's episode gave you one useful idea, that is enough to begin. One good habit, practiced steadily, can do more than 100 good intentions.
So write down your first step, keep it simple, and let it be real. Your money life does not need drama, it needs direction.
And your English does not need perfection. It needs practice. That is why we are here. And that is why we keep showing up with you, one conversation at a time.
Thanks for listening, and remember that clarity is built, not discovered. You build it one review, one choice, and one honest conversation at a time.
We'll be back soon with another conversation that helps your English grow in the background while real life becomes a little easier to navigate.
Before we leave, one more practical note. If your money feels messy, do not start with complicated spreadsheets. Start with the categories that matter most: housing, food, transport, savings, and the small things that keep sneaking up on you.
Yeah, because a simple budget is basically a map. It does not need to be beautiful. It needs to be useful. If the map is too confusing, you keep wandering, and then you blame yourself for getting lost when the real problem is the system.
And people often ask about debt with a lot of fear in their voice. Debt is not a moral failure. It is a situation. You still need to face it, of course, but naming it clearly is better than carrying silent shame around like extra luggage.
Absolutely. The moment you stop treating debt like a secret, it gets lighter. You can list it, sort it, and ask for help if you need to. There is nothing weak about asking a bank, a trusted friend, or a financial professional for guidance.
That is why I like the idea of the emergency fund. Even a tiny cushion changes your nervous system. It says, I do not have to panic over every surprise. I have a small buffer, and that buffer buys me time and calm.
And the buffer does not have to start big. Sometimes people wait because they think the goal must be dramatic, but a small automatic transfer is enough to begin. One small transfer repeated every month can grow into real protection.
The same principle applies to social pressure. Comparing yourself to other people is expensive in every sense. You start buying things to keep up, and then you lose both money and peace. Your life is not their highlight reel, so stop budgeting like it is.
That line is so true. Spend according to your own season, not someone else's performance. If you are saving, building, repairing, or simply trying to stabilize, your money choices should reflect that reality, not an audience that is not even there.
If you live with family, share the plan. If you live with a partner, talk early. Money silence can become tension very quickly. A calm conversation now is usually much easier than a dramatic conversation later when resentment has already grown.
And when people do talk early, money can become teamwork instead of conflict. That is especially important at home, where small misunderstandings can pile up. Clear expectations do not remove every problem, but they stop a lot of unnecessary ones.
This matters even more for freelancers because irregular income can feel like a roller coaster. In that case, simple percentages help. One portion for bills, one for taxes, one for living expenses, and one for building a buffer when times are good.
Right, and you do not need a genius spreadsheet to do that. You need a system you will actually use. If the method is so complicated that you avoid it, it is not helping you. Simplicity is a feature, not a weakness.
Tools should fit the person. If you like apps, use apps. If you like paper, use paper. The best system is the one you keep returning to, because consistency matters more than style when the goal is to create a reliable habit.
And mistakes will happen. Of course they will. You will overspend sometimes, forget something, or make a choice you later regret. That is not the end. The real skill is noticing faster next time and correcting without turning it into a personal disaster.
Recovery is part of financial literacy, too. People often celebrate the perfect budget, but the real story is how you recover from the imperfect one. If you can adjust without shame, you stay in the game, and staying in the game is how you improve.
That is why forgiveness matters. Shame makes people hide, and hiding keeps the cycle going. Honesty breaks the cycle. It lets you say, yes, I overspent, but now I see it, and now I can choose differently next time.
We keep returning to awareness because awareness is the start of every healthy habit. Once you see the pattern, you can question it. Once you question it, you can change it. Without awareness, you are just guessing in the dark.
And habits matter more than motivation, because motivation visits and then leaves. Habits stay behind and do the work. That is the beautiful part. Your future self benefits from the routines you build while your current self is still learning.
Motivation visits, habits stay. I like that. It means we can be compassionate without being passive. We do not need a perfect mood to make a wise choice. We just need a repeatable structure and enough honesty to use it consistently.
Exactly. Habits are the real support system. They carry you on normal days, tired days, and distracted days. If you want financial peace, you build habits that can survive ordinary life, not just the rare moment when you feel highly motivated.
Let us give listeners one final challenge. Do not try to fix everything. Pick one expense to track today. Maybe it is food, maybe it is transport, maybe it is a subscription that has been quietly draining your account for months.
And have one money conversation this week. It can be short, simple, and honest. Ask someone what has worked for them, or share what you were trying. Talking out loud turns a private worry into something you can actually work on.
Then come back to the next episode a little wiser. Not because you became perfect, but because you practiced. Practice is what changes language, and practice is what changes money habits too.
Exactly. One tracked expense, one honest conversation, one small transfer, one thoughtful pause. That is how change starts looking real. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady and useful.
And if you feel nervous, that is okay. Nervous just means you are paying attention. The goal is not to eliminate every feeling, it is to move forward with a little more clarity than yesterday.
I think that is a good place to stop. Thanks for staying with us through the whole conversation. And thanks for letting these ideas settle into something practical instead of staying abstract.
Remember, you are not behind. You are building. You are learning what your money is doing, and you are learning how to guide it with more intention and less fear.
And that is a very real kind of progress. Keep going, keep asking questions, and keep making small decisions that line up with the future you actually want.
See you next time, and until then, be patient with yourself, because clarity is something you build over time.
Bye for now, and keep practicing both your English and your money habits. Both get stronger the same way, one honest step at a time.